You've asked for it, and here it is, my most requested video in recent months, my thoughts and the features for the Yaesu FT2DR. So this is going to have to be a video in multiple parts. Today we're going to cover my thoughts and the features, an overview if you will, on the Yaesu FT2DR. I don't want to tip my hand a little too early, but most people know that this is my primary radio. This is the radio that has replaced all other HTs that I own. And frankly, I find it a very, very good, compelling radio. But I know that it is maligned on the internet. Go no further than the recommended videos on the side of this video and you'll see lots of different opinions on the FT2DR. Go online and you'll see lots of people that find that it's some hit and a lot of miss of a radio. And I'm going to try and cover that right now today. Guys, if you haven't done this already, please hit subscribe and hit that bell. I live stream every week. We talk about ham radio topics covering emergency, preparedness, DIYs, antennas, getting your license, you name it. We try to cover it here on the Ham Radio Crash Course. Thank you so much for subscribing. At the sub $300 price range, this is a very compelling radio. There are features that are close to, if not the best you can get for an HT, but then there are other features that are really lacking and kind of prevent it from being worth that $500 price tag that it used to garner. Now though, sub $300, it's a pretty solid buy. I don't want to screw anything up, so I'm going to go right off the company's website and tell you exactly what is inside this radio, and then I'll tell you what I like and what I don't like. The Yaesu FT2DR and DE, depending on if you're in Europe, has basic standard VHF, UHF transmit and receive capability. However, it also has wide receive capability depending on what channel you're on. Of note, the A channel, the main band as they call it, can receive from 76 to 108 megahertz. That's FM broadcast, 108 to 137 airband, and it can receive 0.5 megahertz all the way up to 1.8 megahertz, which covers your shortwave bands. The B channel, or subband, is basically used for APRs and some of the VHF and UHF modes that it supports on the receive side. I generally use the B band predominantly only for APRs, and the A band I have split between the repeater I'm operating on and then whatever other broadcast frequency I'm listening to, likely an AM radio station. It's important to remember that this does NFM, which is basically your FM dual band capability, and it is an AM double conversion super heterodyne radio for receive side. That's good when you have a lot of different stations or frequencies close to each other. The super heterodyne is the way to go. Power output is 5 watts like most HTs. It has 1,245 programmable channels. The water rating for waterproofing is IPX5, which basically makes it splash-proof and quickly submergible. The FT2DR supports dual monitor in its A and B subchannels and main channels, which allows you to basically operate VHF and UHF independently on those two channels, supporting C4FM for Yaesu System Fusion. The specs mention a loud, vibrant audio, which I will talk about later, but of note here is the wideband receiver, which covers 500 kilohertz through 99.99 megahertz for shortwave, FM, AM broadcast, analog TV stations, although we're not doing that much anymore, audio aircraft, and public service channels. It's actually a pretty decent receiver. Something I will cover in a future video is the APRs data communication. The TNC, if you will, that you can access via USB is not as fully featured as you would get off of a Kenwood D74 or D72. If you were looking for full capability in a TNC connected to a computer, you should probably look to those radios. And then you have the group monitor function, which is something that is a tone-based location system for when you are working in close proximity to other radios. There's a lot of English there, but that's basically what it means. How to find other people with an HT like yours. For the outdoor enthusiast, this has backtrack functionality, which allows you to basically set a navigation point using the embedded GPS. And when you get to your location, basically turn it around and help you walk back the other direction. This was a popular feature in handheld GPS devices and now is something you can get on your phone, but it's nice that it's there, and since this is an outdoor radio for me, it's a good extra feature. The snapshot picture taking is a capability that comes from purchasing a very expensive speaker microphone combo, which has a very low resolution, so I'm not a big fan of that. And AMS mode select is basically the ability to select and detect receive signal audio and switch to it automatically, which works pretty well. So I'm generally a fan of most of these features. So the reason I bought this, and this goes to the things I like, the reason I bought this is it's a Yaesu radio that's got a rugged case and a relatively protected screen. Now, this is not a capacitive screen. This is a resistive screen, which requires you to press a little bit harder to do it, which is one of the major gripes people have against this radio, this being a gray screen, only black and white, no color, and it can get a little washed out in the sun. All things that are kind of negative about this radio. I find that's not that big a deal. I don't mind not having a full color screen with today modern type screen type capability. The buttons on the side and the flap covers all do a pretty good job of sealing it away. It's very splash proof. This became my outdoor radio of choice, particularly because it has APRs, and when I do a SOTA activation, I like to have APRs on me. To go along with that, being in the field, you're often going to want to run all day, have it on all day, at least monitoring, and then with the case of APRs, squawking out your packets every now and then for your beacon information. This radio lasts all day on a charge, and that includes listening to FM stations on one of the other channels while receiving and transmitting APRs. Aside from APRs being the major buying point for why I got this radio, I was also interested in its wideband capability. Now, I'll give it both a plus and a minus on this. The receive capability of this radio is not that great, and if you look at the size of this, it's not very big, even though I have small hands. This is not going to function like an SDR that you have, or a shortwave AM FM radio that is devoted for receiving. It's a feature, an extra feature that's a part of this radio that does an okay job. It won't replace any of your standard receivers, but if this is the only radio you carry out in the field, it works. I particularly like to use this for Airband when I'm walking with my kids. They find it really cool to be able to listen to the pilots and sometimes see the planes flying overhead. Puts a little reality into radio, and this does a great job of receiving airbands. The other thing I like that this has, the screen has the capability of displaying a band scope, and the band scope can work on any of the bands that it operates on, receive or transmit receive, and you have a choice between, I believe, 1730 and 72 channels at any one time. So that basically means the vertical lines it displays and the intensity of those signals. I have used this to track down RFI, I've used this to track down local stations. Recently, in fact a month ago when I was going crazy trying to figure out what's going on in my office, in my house, I used this to great effect to help me in that area. Now, I'm not the biggest digital voice radio guy. I like DMR just fine, although I'm more oftentimes on HF. I do, however, really like C4FM or Yaesu System Fusion and their step-up level of that, which is called Wires X. Wires X is kind of like a menu-driven, touch-based system for getting onto a digital repeater or node. Now, I find that their implementation, although I'm not a D-Star guy, the Wires X implementation is really nice, and for me, it's a great perk to buy this radio. If this radio didn't have a digital mode, I wouldn't be that upset about it. I really got this for the APRS and the wideband receive. With that said, I have had a blast using the C4FM Yaesu System Fusion and my hotspot.
73 K6 NAZ, I think it was K6 HP.
So the plus becomes negative, although I like to use Yaesu System Fusion. Wires access through a hotspot doesn't really exist right now. I will be making a video in the future, though, talking about using radios like this to act as a node. Now, that's just an extra money that you have to pour into getting a radio connected to the internet to be able to perform a wires function. And wires is different than Yaesu System Fusion as far as the functionality you have on screen. One blaring negative that many people say is that the menu system is convoluted, and I will make a video specifically on the menu system because I got started making one and it is complicated. The more I made the video breaking down all the menus and when to do what and where and how to cross-link these different things together, I realized this is not an entry-level radio in any way. If you want an entry-level radio, consider an FT2. That is going to get you most of the way to this as possible, and you'll have a really good experience. I have a video on that. I'll post it in the cards, post it in the link in the description. What I've found is that there is a configuration of the radio menu system, and then there are additional menu options to either turn those things on or disconnect them. In the case of APRs, you have to turn on beaconing, turn on GPS, and you can't just leave all the settings on default like you might expect with other radios. You actually have to turn on some of the features on which your path is, where you want your beacons to go out, on what path specifically, and then you have to turn the APRs system on. Same thing goes with signaling for like PL tones on a repeater. You have to go into the radio configuration, turn PL tone on, set it to the proper tone, and then link it to the whatever repeater you're talking on. It all sounds pretty straightforward, but you're jumping between VFO, your radio config, and then what they call FW menu. And the FW menu is kind of like where you control scanning and bringing up your band scope. All the features that you would do in the operation, you do with the FW menu. But all the configuration of the radio is in a separate set of menus, which is actually pretty confusing. I will say though, I don't think that it is too confusing that you can't figure it out by poking around for a while. It is different, I give you that, but it is not impossible without a manual. That's okay. I won't give that a bonus because it is still confusing. Radios are meant to receive generally more than they transmit. No matter how strong an operator you are, you're probably going to be just sitting in receive mode more than you're in transmit mode. And this radio has a flaw there. Because they cram so much into this thing, your speaker is just tiny. It's just a small little part of the handheld, and in fact, some of it is obscured by this second row of menu buttons. The sound is not great out of this, and its maximum volume is much lower than cheaper radios, all of the FT2. In fact, here is a comparison I did with Billy Bob at the HRO in Anaheim, where we did a comparison of the sound quality, the audio quality.
Areas of winds west 15 miles an hour with gusts to 30 miles an hour.
Okay, yeah.
Saturday, partly cloudy in the morning. Mostly sunny.
Yes, sir.
Highs 64 to 69. Areas of winds west 15 to 20 miles an hour. Gusts to 35 miles an hour, becoming 30 miles an hour in the afternoon. Saturday night.
Yeah.
I show you that video in the hopes that you can tell a difference, but remember, using a radio where its speaker goes directly to your brain through your ear is a lot different than hearing the audio coming out of here into my camera's microphone, being processed by my computer and played to you back via YouTube. You really owe it to yourself to hear this in person. If you can beg, borrow, or steal one to try it out for a little while, go to a store, Gigaparts, or an HRO, or whatever, and listen to it, or find a club member that has one. Really compare it to your other radios to see if you find that the audio quality is acceptable or not. For me, it's okay, because I'm not crazy about audiophile stuff on ham radio HTs. I feel that being that intense about audio quality on something like this is a bit, not snobbish, what's the word I'm looking for? Unrealistic would be the word I would use. It's a bit unrealistic to think that any HT is going to have stellar audio capability, aside from something that's like specifically a receiver, right? So anyway, that is a glaring problem. When the FT2DR came out, it had that $500 price tag, and people were upset with what they got for that money. I don't disagree with them at all. I didn't buy the radio when it came out. I bought it in 2018, not under $300, but pretty close. And I find that that's a pretty justifiable price tag for what they give you at that level. So the package at under $300 now sits with embedded GPS, an APRs system that I believe and feel is better than the competitors, a long battery life, a wide receive, a rugged platform that would stand up to some abuse in some water without much issue. Again, it's my go-to outdoor radio. It's my go-to everyday carry radio. And just a better feel to it. I don't know what it is about the radio. I seem to, when I'm using it and it's configured and it's all set, I really enjoy it. I find that the usability of just a configured radio that's all set up and just being able to use that FW menu system to get into the different fields that I'm looking for is very straightforward. I use it as a receiver for Airband, for AM FM radio, while also doing APRS, while also listening to my local repeater. It has 3 receive options. There's 2 devoted bands, and then you can split one of the bands into
Jiggle Ball presented by Capital.
One of the bands into a dual receive capability, which I find is awesome. So I had to give you all my feelings on the radio because it's divisive and there's things that people don't like on it, and some of those things don't affect me and they may or may not affect you. So really, I hope I'm just giving you information here on what you would either like or dislike about the radio. I vote it at under $300 as a buy. Maybe not a solid buy, and there are glaring things that don't work that great on it. The microphone or the speaker and the screen that people don't seem to like, that others may not have a problem with. If you are going to buy this, I recommend you look at the RT Systems programming software for it if you want to program with a computer. I almost program all my radios with a computer, and I have to say, I don't use it for the FT2DR. I program it by hand. That's one thing I have to give Yaesu, is that the programming by hand of their radios is very straightforward and very easy to learn and remember when you get back to it and you're like, I really want to save that channel. So in a lot of ways, being a feature-rich radio yet still being able to program it by hand, I feel is a perk, is a really strong perk. But if you do want to do it with software, the software from Yaesu is not that great. So look at the RT System software. And go look at my video on the FTM400, and you'll see Billy Bob actually programming it with a tablet, which you can do, which is awesome. And you can do the same thing with the FT2DR. If you like this video, or if there's one thing you want to understand first before I go make these new sets of videos, post in the comments below. Are you struggling with the FT2DR? Do you love it? Did you use it for a while and then send it back like I know Bob did? Let me know. I'm curious what people think, because this is actually a pretty divisive amateur radio, which is always kind of funny when those things come along. Guys, again, please subscribe if this is your first time watching, or if you've been thinking about it for a while, or maybe you already have subscribed. Make sure you click that bell, because I do live stream on ham radio every Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And yeah. This is a fun radio. I dreaded making this video, though, and all the subsequent videos, because it's actually going to take me a little bit of time.